One of the things that I ask people who are interested in going sailing is how flexible they are, because sailing by its very nature is flexible. We have to adapt a lot. And so today we're going to talk about flexibility, why it's useful, and how it applies in sailing and in life. Welcome to the What Could Go Right podcast. We are your hosts, Erik Orton.
And I'm Emily Orton.
And here we talk about personal growth and sailing. In 2014, we moved aboard a fixer-upper sailboat and bootstrapped a year sailing with our 5 kids, and it changed our lives forever.
We tell the whole story in our memoir, our book, 7 at Sea. On this podcast, we want to help you go from fear to freedom, one adventure at a time.
So one of the things that I talk to everybody who goes sailing with us, and I ask them a series of questions to try and make sure that we're all a good fit for each other. And one that I've started to ask lately is about flexibility. As Emily and I have mentioned in the past, we recently did some cruise ships. We were speaking on cruise ships, and we learned that not all trips on the water are the same. Cruise ships are not very flexible, and that's okay. You know when you're going to depart. You know
when you're going to arrive.
You know where you're going to be every day. You can plan in advance, weeks or even months in advance, what you're going to do in that port on that day. You can book a horseback riding trip on the beach. You can book a snorkel excursion. You can book all kinds of things, but it's prescribed.
It's prescribed. It's scheduled, and that can be wonderful. And that can be exactly what you're looking for. Sometimes when people are going on vacation, they're like, I don't want to have to plan anything. Just tell me what to pack and I will show up, and my meals will all be provided, and I will either get off the boat or I'll stay on the boat at the given locations. And if I want to plan an excursion, I can't. I will say occasionally an excursion would get canceled, but we would still have shown up at port at the exact same time. And I'm going to need to allow 20 or 30 minutes to get off the boat and to shore, and I'll have to have my passport. And, there are just things that you can know in advance. And sometimes that is what is comforting, and that is what is relaxing. What we offer is different than that.
So we're going to talk about flexibility and why it has served us well, and why it's an attribute that lends itself to the kinds of trips that we do, and how it might help you in life in general. So one of the things that I say is, look, our trips we always have a plan. We don't just kind of say, oh, let's just start sailing west and see what happens. We say, we're going to leave here at about this time on this day, and we're going to head this direction. Here's some ideas of where we're going to be on day 1. Here's an idea where we'll be on day 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on.
It's penciled in.
And then I just tell people, look, when you're sailing, the last thing you want to do is be rigid, because all kinds of things come up in sailing. The weather is going to be different, and we're living much closer to the weather than you are on land usually. Mm-hmm. And it matters a lot more when you're on a small boat, like a 40 or 50 foot boat versus a 500 foot cruise ship. They can sort of plow through and beat through whatever comes their way. And we want to flow with the elements. We want to move with the weather rather than fight it or work against it. And so I guess just a couple of examples. So recently I was in the Virgin Islands, and we anchored off this island called Virgin Gorda in a place called Savannah Bay. And we were going to head the next morning out to Anegada, which is a few hours sail north. It's the most distant islands of the Virgin Islands. And so it's a long sail. It's a beautiful sail. So we got out of the bay, we put the sails up, and we're heading out. And I knew that the winds were going to be light, but they were lighter than forecasted. And we were looking at the prospect of sailing for maybe 3 hours, moving at maybe 2 to 3 miles an hour, about 3 knots. So as we kind of, the sails are kind of loose because there's not a lot of wind, and we're just sort of bobbing along, and you're making progress, but you don't always feel like you're going somewhere. And so I said to the group, I was like, look, we can go to Anegada the wind's going to be even lighter tomorrow. So we're definitely going to have to motor back. So we can have a kind of a very slow, lulling sail downwind today and then motor back tomorrow. Or we can just go somewhere entirely different where we're sailing on a much more fun, exciting angle to the wind. And we decided to go someplace that was 90 degrees from where we were sailing, which puts us across the wind. And it was so fun. We got the sails up, they filled up, the boat was moving at a good speed. And we went to a place that I'd never been before, through down a side of the islands that I hadn't been to before. And it was just a delightful day. And so that's one example of why we might adjust our plan based on the weather, despite our best efforts to kind of forecast and predict where we want to be. So that's one reason flexibility serves us well on our sailing trips. And in your life, I'm guessing that there's a lot of elements beyond your control. It can be how other people behave. It can be, it can be the weather where you are. It can be, the economy, air quotes, like this or that, the economy. And so, so much of life is beyond our control that if we learn to harness the elements or adapt to what's happening, that's the whole idea of navigating. Do you want to say anything about navigating in general?
Yeah, we like the word navigating because navigating is realistically and humbly acknowledging that there are many factors that we don't control in our lives, but that we do have a lot of information, and we're going to take that in and intentionally or even strategically use that information to help us move the direction that we want to go. That only works if you know where you want to go. But that is why we really love the word navigating. I hear the kids these days talk about main character energy, like you are the hero in your own story or the protagonist, like a decision maker, a change maker. And I like navigator.
Yeah. So we do a lot of navigating where we harness the elements of what we have versus what we wished would be. And we flow with it. Also, boats are an interesting thing. Boats can be fickle. Boats are very reliable. They will keep you afloat, but the more comforts that we build into boats, the more things that can potentially break or go wrong, and often do.
I mean, it's the same with a house or a car. So I'm sure everybody listening can relate. With the more bells and whistles you have, the more maintenance you'll be doing.
And we take out really nice boats. And so there's a lot of things that function almost all the time, but occasionally things go wrong.
Or different than you expected. I just remember I kept getting updates from this most recent trip, and so many things went differently than expected. And everyone had an incredible time and almost saw it as like bonus features. But do you want to talk about some of those adjustments that you had to make along the way?
Yeah, I do. This was probably a high watermark in terms of flexibility for a trip, this most recent trip that we did to the Bahamas. We took out a beautiful 41-foot Bali. We were a smaller group, and so it was a 4-cabin boat. And we were sailing along, having a good time. We actually had to motor out from Nassau out to the Exumas because it's all upwind. So we motored out there on day one, or actually on day two, we motored out. First night we always spend at the dock, sleeping at the dock. And then day two, we motored out and then got to anchor, enjoyed the evening. Day three, we're raising the sails. We're gonna finally go sailing. And as this mainsail goes up, one of the seams across with the full width of the mainsail has separated. And so the mainsail is sort of flapping in two sections.
Not great.
That's like trying to fly a kite with a split down the middle.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work well. And, I don't think anybody did anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong in raising the sail, and maybe it didn't get checked as thoroughly as it could have before we left. But, I'm not going to point fingers, but I called the base and I was like, hey, here's the situation. We raised the sail, and do you have a replacement? And the nice thing about chartering boats is they will help you solve these problems and oftentimes do it for you. Whereas when you own your boat, you have to do them on your own. So I was like, hey, this is where we are. This is where we're going to be. Can you bring us out a replacement sail so that we can sail throughout the rest of the week? They checked on everything. The news was we don't have a replacement sail for that model of boat. I was like, okay. and I've seen this done before. I was like, it sounds like, and actually they proposed it as well. We can give you a replacement boat. We will meet you. We will come out with our crew to where you are. We'll bring you a new boat, and you're going to just take your belongings from the boat that you're on, switch to the other boat, and then we'll bring the other boat back and fix it on our time. Meanwhile, your trip can continue on as scheduled. So I was like, okay, great. We knew where we were going to go. We did have the jib sail, or the sail at the front of the boat, and we put that up, and we were able to sail at pretty good speed with just one sail. We would have been really ripping along if we had two, but we didn't. And so, we sailed and got to the spot, Norman Key, where we wanted to spend the night, and had a great afternoon snorkeling and had a lovely dinner on the boat. And we knew that they were on their way with the replacement boat, and they got there kind of late at night, like around,
later than they thought they were going to get there. Yeah.
There was a lot of headwind that they had to fight against. And so we expected them around 7:30ish, and they got there, which is still daylight, but they got there at 9:30, which is dark.
Yeah.
And we were kind of in a tricky spot to do this because, and I should have thought this through better as a captain, I guess. We were in a spot that had a pretty good current that would change directions based on the tide. And so they had to pull up alongside us. And we did a technique called rafting, where you bring two boats along side by side, and you basically use lines to tie the two boats together. We were at anchor. They came alongside us. We tossed them our docking lines, and they lashed them around their cleats. And we basically kind of like just raft it up, as we say. And then we had all evening to prepare. And so we had, everyone was packed in their suitcases. We just handed them right over from one boat to the other. And then they brought us boxes so we could transfer all of the groceries that we'd bought from one boat to the other. And everyone was super, just upbeat and positive about it, because this is not the kind of thing you think, oh, you know what I want to do on my vacation and trip is I want to move. Nobody, once you get into a hotel room, if there's something wrong with it, you don't really want to move to a new hotel room. You might have a good reason that another hotel room would be better, but the actual moving is never the fun part.
But it ended up being a bonus, because the people who were on this group, they were really looking at different models of catamarans for future use. And so for them, they got to try a couple of different kinds.
Yeah, for one couple, they were on this trip because they'd never sailed on a catamaran before, and they wanted to. They're scheduled to do a trip in June where they are going to be running the boat, and they wanted to have a chance to sort of do a test run. And the boat that we moved onto was the exact model that they would be taking out on their own trip. And so the advantage was they got to try out, and everybody on board got to try out two different kinds of boats and sort of see, here's some of the similarities, here's some of the differences. And so if you're,
just if you have an open mind and you're looking for the good, then, you could see, yes, I had to move my luggage, which was hopefully just like one carry-on minimal amount, and just moving the food was probably the most tedious. And then you're like, boom, now we have a boat that works, and we got to try out two different boats, and we got to see what rafting is, and we had this little adventure, and it can be very cool.
Yeah. So in fact, for me, it wasn't what I had expected for the week, but it was a good way of leveling up my skills in terms of I'd never rafted boats before. And then I had to jump over to this other boat and instantly sort of figure out, I had to captain this boat right away because we were going to then separate.
They weren't giving you another walkthrough and tour of how everything works. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a little bit of a steep learning curve for me in that moment. But here's the point, I guess, is everybody on board was flexible. Everybody on board was game for this unexpected plot twist. And that's what can make these trips, can make or break them. And so that's why we look for people who are flexible, people who can say, oh man, what a cool adventure, instead of, oh my goodness,
what a headache.
And, oh my goodness, I got to try out the boat that we wanted to try out for our next trip. And what a win. And I can say, hey, I got to learn a new skill as a captain. I got to learn a new set of navigation instruments under short timeline. And that was a good level up for me. And so because we were flexible and adaptive, it was really a positive experience. And I think if we had a different attitude, it could have been negative. And so that's why we lean into people that think flexibility and adaptation are fun. rather than a drag. We want people who that kind of like, that's a perk.
Yeah, I would either call it like an adventure mindset, or you're going forward with a discovery mindset. Like, I don't know exactly what's going to happen. I can't predict everything that's going to happen. I'm on a voyage of discovery, and I will just see what each new day brings. There is some known, you know where you're going to be. Your schedule is penciled out. You know typically that you're going to be having a really nice boat. And if anything comes up, there will be a team to take care of that. And the meals are planned. You're not like, what are we going to eat today? It's just like, which of these 4 or 5 meals that have been planned and all the ingredients are here on board do I want to have tonight? So it's not like it's completely unpredictable. But what I predict most of all is that if this sounds like fun to you, getting out on the water, learning how to sail, some of the other surprises were dolphins, sea turtles. There were a lot of other surprises that are like, oh, I wasn't expecting to see dolphins. How about we chase them for a little while? That's not on our itinerary. On a cruise ship, you're never going to chase the dolphins, right? It's going to be like, no, we have to be in our next destination by this time. But on a sailboat, you can say like, you know what? Let's follow them for a little while and see how it goes.
Actually that happened. I was sailing with a group in St. Lucia, and we were heading one direction. And then all of a sudden, everyone on the bow was like, oh my goodness, dolphins. And there were hundreds of them, hundreds of dolphins coming straight at us in the opposite direction. And somebody said, can we follow them? And we were sailing. So the sails are up, and my immediate thought was like, oh no, they're going the opposite direction of where we want to go. And I was like, you know what? Yes,
we can.
Yes, we can. I turned on the engines, and we turned the boat around, and we followed these dolphins, and it was a blast. It was like a beautiful stampede of just dolphins diving in like rows of them and dozens. And it was just so fun to kind of like be amongst them. And I was careful with the propellers running that we didn't get too close. We don't ever want to.
And they are smart.
And they're smart animals. But just to be able to say like, you know what? Yes, we can. Because if we were on a cruise ship, or if we were on a dive boat or something else where you had to get to a certain place by a certain time, then you wouldn't or couldn't. But we're like, you know what? The place we're going to is not far away. There's plenty of daylight left. Yeah, let's go. And we follow the dolphins. And it was a really thrilling, dreamy moment. So that's a great example.
Yeah, that was beautiful. The number one thing I predict is that if this sounds fun to you, you will have an amazing time on one of our Navigator sailing trips.
What could go right? Hey guys, before we wrap up, 2 things. I want to give you the sailing update, and then I want to give you the sailing takeaway. We're going to be in Italy June 7th through the 14th. Currently 2 cabins available. There's that. We're going to be in Greece July 19th through the 26th. And then we're going to be in Croatia August 2nd through the 9th. So those are our European trips. And then we've got, jumping to the fall, we've got La Paz, Mexico, the Sea of Cortez. That's going to be October 20th through the 25th. British Virgin Islands, November 10th through the 15th. And then the Bahamas, December 8th through the 13th. So that's the lineup for the rest of this year. So if any of those sound fun to you, hit me up. We'll talk, see if it's fit. Also, at the end of our trips, I like to share what people have taken away. So I asked them a couple of questions. They're kind enough to share their answers with me and give me permission to share them with you. So here's a takeaway from somebody who came sailing with us recently.
What I was worried about was, getting out and sailing, actually seeing the lines come up, making sure everything was right, making sure that all these different people would be able to work together to get it all going and actually get moving. What I was delighted about was being able to catch some fish.
And we were delighted too, right?
And entertain people, me catching some fish. So I was able to get that out of my thing, and what I would say to somebody wanting to come and sail, blow your mind. Blow your mind. So.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks, Clint.
It's awesome.